You are good.
I'm not used to it. It's nice to be back at this place that has changed its name since last year. We talked about two Joes being here. Once upon a time, they used to talk about the three Joes. And the three Joes are basically the beginning of Zambian Baptist ministers ministering in English. Baptist work had hitherto been in Zambia, all of it in vernacular. So the first Baptist church planted in Zambia in English also has changed its name. It just started as Emmausdale Church, and we sent the third Joe for training to Nairobi to come and Kenya to come and pastor that church, which was planted actually by scientists working at Mount Makulu at the time. And then this Joe was also one of the first, with the two of them, two Zambians who took over the evangelical work in English, which was basically Scripture Union. That was the first mission working in English. All the missionary work before that time was in vernacular. Zambia had been petitioned to various mission groups. If you were a particular denomination, worked in Southern Province, some worked Northwestern Province, and so on. So it remained like that really until the 80s, I suppose. Well, the first Zambian church was actually planted 50 years ago, 1975. So Akapolio sent him off to UK to come and be, him and the late Bapundu Mutala, to come and head the work in schools. And in a way, an institution like this was drawing on people who are coming from English language, a language context. So that was exciting times. I think the time that we had the privilege of being involved in ministry in Lusaka, and actually I pastored the daughter church of Akapolio's church. He was pastoring Douala Baptist, which is a mother church, and I was pastoring the middle one, and the other Joe was pastoring the first English-speaking Baptist church. So it was, those were exciting times. And I think in many ways, it's really a testimony to something that God was doing. And even the birth of Tika at that time was part of this revival time that we might not have been conscious of. But I was a bit involved, partly because I came to Zambia as a linguistically challenged, shall we say. I tried to fit into a vernacular church, because I was very keen to get back into Zambia, but I didn't have the language. And then I was invited one day by Ms. Breed at Mount Makulu, Lusaka Baptist Church, and they were speaking a language that I understood. So I kind of settled there, had no interest actually in becoming a pastor. If there's one thing I told Mount Makulu on day one when I got to Mount Makulu was that, guys, I want you to know that I'm a Christian, and I want you to know that for me, what that means is that Jesus is the Lord of my life. And as far as I understand, I'm here for 2 years. After that, I'll do whatever He wants me to do. Mumano, I'm thinking, except to be a pastor. Not because I was rebellious, but because I thought getting punished. I'd don't think I could do that, because almost from the time that I became a Christian at university back in Glasgow, I was in a sense involved in pastoral encouragement with a lot of people. Maybe 10, 12. And I'm thinking, pastor, multiply that by 10, how quite it in Guanisha. So, but God in His grace led me back to go and train the same place where my pastor had trained to come and be the first Zambian pastor. Apparently, they'd been praying for a Zambian pastor, and the reluctant one ended up being the one. My first encounter with, I must say that it's been a real blessing just to hear Tim Cobb speak and give that history, because I was certainly concerned from 1981 in my own situation, in just grooming young people who had the potential for ministry in a kind of church context. So I was committed to leadership development, but at church level. And by that time, I was part of what was going on in ISIS in EFZ. So it was good to hear the background, all the labor, all the tears and sweat that went into the establishment of the institution that I first visited in 1982. This thing, Graduate Enrichment, used to be called Spiritual Emphasis Week, and I was invited to come and speak to the alumni at that time, and did what they usually did. I didn't know that, but apparently I was an expositor, so I expounded titles to them. So that was my first encounter with TICA in 1982. In 1989, after Roger Kemp, that has already been mentioned as a principal of TICA, following Jacob, he had handed over to another Australian, Rod Pell, the late. And at that time, I was involved in so much back at the Santa Baptist Church that I was really basically burning out. I was on radio, I was on TV, I was preaching 3 times on a Sunday. No, 2 times on a Sunday, and then midweek 3 times in a week, and doing a lot of counseling since 1983. I don't think they realized that I was beginning to do my counseling then. So by 88, at the end of 88, I pretty much collapsed. I lost my voice, and Akapodio is one of the people trying to help me to kind of manage. I think he gave me a whole lot of reading. This is how you use the technology of your voice so that you don't lose it. But in 1989, I was beginning to think of a change of pace just to survive in ministry. And I got an SOS from TICA at that time, from Rod Pell, that we need help here. I was not interested in being a pastor. Well, that's what I ended up being. And when I was quite comfortable with being a pastor, I was not interested in theological education. And then I get an SOS from TICA. But my reason for responding positively to that was at that time I thought there was no pastor at TICA training pastors. There was no Zambian training Zambian pastors. And I thought, well, I was the sort of Zambian. Okay, brought up by a Scottish school teacher, but I had the right color, maybe the accent, but still a Zambian. So I thought I could help out maybe for 3 years and then go back to being what I'd become comfortable with, being a pastor. So that was my first invitation to come to Tika. And before I could come to Tika, I went to Australia, partly again to slow down, to change pace and to prepare to come to teach at the university level. So when I came to Tika, I came as a lecturer. I was okay with that. And then responsibilities, public relations, I suppose the kind of things that Nama does, much more advanced level. And then, at that time, Shoberg was the academic dean, and he wanted to hand over the baton to me. And I said, I'm not even sure whether I'm still going to be around. This was 1999, so I'd already been here quite a few years. As soon as stuff happened in my life, a lot of the things that I said I didn't want to do, those are the things that I ended up doing. So I took over from Shoberg, and Kaporio was a principal at that time. And when he had served his time, he was about to go back to his, I don't know whether we maybe call it his alma mater. He's going to All Nations to teach there. In fact, to be principal there at All Nations, I was approached to take over from him. And I said, I'm sure you guess what I said. I said, no, thank you. So people kept pushing, but I had the support of my wife. My wife said no. So with all the pushing, at least I had the support of my wife until she betrayed me, she changed and joined. You are the one, you're the one. So I became principal. We talked about accreditation. Again, I think it was somewhere in the 2000 now, I was asked to take over from a friend of mine who was heading the next, which is like the next level to Tika. He had been what we now call the director of ACTI at the time. But because he was heading that institution under the Evangelicals of Africa, he couldn't head ACTI as well, which is also under the Evangelicals of Africa. So I was asked in Cape Town to take over from him. And I said to him, well, here's my answer. Here I am, Lord, but please send someone else. And so I forgot about it. I'm doing accreditation work in Blantyre, and the accreditation secretary there, it seemed they were still intent on having me take over as the director of ACTI. I said, okay, I'll try it for 1 year. 10 years later, so Tim Cobb has mentioned that Tika, when it was started, had this vision of not just providing leadership in Zambia, but being a school that people from other nations would come to. And indeed, even at the time that I came to Tika, there were still international students. So we had students from South Africa, from Kenya. I think Mary Caro had some dealings with some casual misunderstandings with a certain Ugandan student, who said his supporters they hadn't eaten for 3 days. And what they meant was the Kwadumunani. So they had to eat rice. And when Mary Caro investigated that they'd actually been eating, because they didn't eat shima, which is for us, that's food. So they hadn't had food for 3 days. The Canadians there said, these people are training for ministry and they're telling lies. So just a cultural misunderstanding. So, point I was making there was that this institution had people from different parts of the world. We even had an Australian student here. So we had students from all over. So something of the vision that COP had was actually being fulfilled here. And then, of course, just remember that Bakapodi was actually the first Zambian principal to take over TICA. And yeah. But the thing that, as we were going through that time of worship, the thing, and we sang songs, and even as I was coming here, the one thing that was going through my mind is just God's faithfulness, not just to TICA, but personally, how God has been faithful to us. When we're coming to TICA, we're coming to TICA knowing that this is an institution that was started by being staffed by missionaries who were being supported in that way. And so, basically TICA didn't pay salary. And so when we were coming to Zambia, I was pastoring a big church in Sydney, so quite comfortable as far as that is concerned. So when I said to my family, we're coming to TICA and it doesn't pay salary, they said, what? What are we going to eat? So my response to that was just to say, the one that I believe I'm going to serve there is the same God who took a whole nation from Egypt to the promised land. And they didn't have Kentucky Fried Chicken in the desert. They didn't have Hungry Lion or anything like that. But he took them, and he deliberately took them where there was none of that stuff. For 40 years, took care of them. That is the God who will take care of us. But please don't just take my word for it. So we're going to be talking to him until each one of you has that same conviction. Sometimes our prayer times will be in chaos because our youngest didn't know the language of Zion. So when she started talking to God about the challenges, what about this? Then we'd all burst into laughter, and that would be the end of that session. By the time we were coming to Zambia, I think everyone was comfortable that the Lord would take care of us. And we came to Zambia in 1994, and up to now, my family can still celebrate the faithfulness of God in taking care of us. So next week I'll be with them, and one of the things, my agenda was just to thank God for the way in which He has taken care of us, the way that He's been so faithful. And so it's really wonderful to be part of an institution that recognizes the faithfulness of God. In spite of some of the challenges that my sister Margaret mentioned, God still continues to be faithful. So that's on a personal level. What applies to TICA applies to my family, in a very real way. I'm a little bit older now, maybe not as old as Van Koop, but we're certainly older than all the Zambians here. And one of the things about when you become a senior citizen, that's what some people, polite people, are calling a senior citizen, is that your memory begins to go. And I remember Bastubing, I suppose I must have been in my 50s then, and begin to get a little forgetful. And he just says to me, Joe, it only gets worse. But for me, again, the goodness of God is that has been a point of intimacy between me and my father. Well, I tend to call God my father. It's that kind of relationship. I leave my dining table, go to the bedroom, too quickly, and by the time I get there, I can't remember what I came there for. So I just asked my father, you know what I came for? And he reminds me. So that's almost on a daily basis. So that memory thing has actually become a link of having this daily contact with my God. And to me now it's quite amusing. I think God has a sense of humor, because sometimes I get to the bedroom before I remember that I've forgotten what I came for. He's actually taking me to what I want. And sometimes he says, just stretch your hand. Oh, then this is what I came for. So there's some blessings. I think it's this thing, to me there's more and more depth in some of the things that Jesus says. When he says, without me you can do nothing. So I'm enjoying the senior citizen. But one thing that I take away from TICA, from the student body, there was a testimony from one of the students. Maybe he was not the only one, but this is what they said, that TICA was a good place to have a crisis. If you don't have a problem, this is a good place to have a problem. And that was because of the importance of relationships. Not just with God, but with one another. And Bobby said this, in a sense, just analyze. I think the only challenge that, when I was leaving TICA, the challenge that I gave to EFZ is that this place needs to get more local support. Yes. And we have the capacity to do that. Yes. I mean, even thinking about the church that I pastored and the church that was born out of Sanka Baptist and then Dollar Baptist, even just those three churches, if they were committed to supporting evangelical work in Zambia, they would be able to support TICA. When I was a pastor, we supported not just TICA, we supported a whole lot of other institutions. We supported TICA, we supported Zambia Fellowship of Evangelical Students, we supported ZBA, we supported Nurses Christian Fellowship, and by the time I left Lusaka Baptist Church, 35% of our income was committed to being given away. So we're committed to not spending 35% of our income. We started tithing 10%, went to 25% when they sent me to the UK. We got stuck there for a while. By the time I was leaving, we had upped our tithing to 35%. Now just imagine if churches were committed, not just to their own little work, but were committed to the Lord's work in a broader way, TICA would be thriving beyond what we see now. And I tried to say to EFZ, the last meeting that I attended, you guys, we were spoiled by the way that we started, because we were supported by missionaries, and we got so used to that we didn't take responsibility for this institution as Zambians. And I believe if maybe, I hope the alumni are particularly listening, if your churches were committed to just supporting your alma mater, TICA would be a lot better off, and Margaret would have much less headaches on the issue of finances. But we do thank God, nevertheless, in spite of all those challenges. I mean, that building must have cost in a few ways. So I just want to encourage us as Zambians to take ownership of this institution and to support it wholeheartedly. That is the challenge that I would like to leave with us as we celebrate God's faithfulness up to this time.